I'm quite humbled really to be called an expert in stapeliads. I'm still learning every day. So yeah, a little bit of background on me that I live in Lake Charles, so it's only about 2.5 hours drive to Houston. So I hope to be there, but my stapeliads is really a side job. I have a day job, so hopefully maybe for the fall sale I can make a trip out there and even have some plants for sale, but I can't say for certain at the moment. But yeah, I've been collecting succulents since I was 12. I was born in England, and my family moved to South Africa when I was 7 years old. And when I was about 12 is when the succulent bug bit me. And I've been collecting succulents on and off since then. I mean, I've moved several times. I've moved to different locations in South Africa. I've moved now across continents. And so normally when you move, you end up having to, unfortunately, get rid of your collection. But it doesn't mean that you necessarily lose the interest in the plants. So yeah, since I've been collecting for so long, I've collected most types of succulents and many types of cacti over that period. And as I've got older, I've realized that I can't collect everything. So I've really specialized these days more in the stapeliads and the succulent Asclepiadaceae. So I do have some other plants as well. I don't just have those, but the bulk of my collection are those types of materials. So I guess maybe then now would be a good time for me to switch over then to my presentation, because I'm going to be talking about the succulent Asclepiadaceae, specifically mainly on stapeliads, and I'll tell you what they are. And also I'll be sharing a bunch of photographs and cultivation tips and hopefully other useful information. So I'm going to try and share my screen again. We had a little bit of a problem with this just before we started, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
It's going good.
Okay, so, okay, there's my title. Can you see my title slide, Echo?
Yes, it's a little bit delayed, but we can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so hopefully I can change the slide okay as well. Let's see. Okay, there you are. So I'm going to be talking about what the succulent Asclepiadaceae are and where in the world you find them. And I'm also going to talk about some of their unique characteristics, talk a bit about their life cycle and how they get pollinated, as well as sharing my growing tips and maybe also some tips on how to overcome any issues you may have with these plants. So that's what I'm going to try and cover in the next 30 minutes or so. Let's start my timer. Okay, so yeah, what are they? They are actually from the milkweed family. So you'll see when they, if you look at the structure of the flowers very closely, they look very similar to that of milkweeds. Also the same family as the Hoya genus, for example. But they've got very diverse and specialized adaptations for not only pollination, but also for the environment in which they live in. They I think quite well known in the succulent community for their very unique star-shaped flowers. Certainly the stapeliads are. And then you may also be familiar with the Ceropegias. So I'm sure that many of you know the string of hearts, Ceropegia woodii. That's probably the most popular Ceropegia that I know of. And it's really a house plant, even that non-succulent people like. So they fall in the same family. And I'm going to be sharing some pictures of their amazing blooms. You'll see that they've got blooms which are almost wax-like. And I think that if I remember correctly, the name Ceropegia means wax fountain. So I'll be sharing some photos of those. And they all belong to this Asclepiadaceae family. And they've all got very specialized succulent stems and pollination mechanisms. That's really what stands out about them. Even the Ceropegias, those which have a tuberous root, that's actually a stem. It's not really a root. And I see that they've also, now been grouped in the same family as things like the Pachypodiums and the desert roses, but it's I guess a subfamily in that group these days. Okay, so where do you find them? You find them really in the dry regions of the Old World. So unfortunately, we don't find any naturally occurring in the dry regions in Northern America. Typically, it's stretching from kind of Myanmar and Sri Lanka and India across Arabian Peninsula, Northern Africa, even into Spain to some extent, and the Canary Islands, and then all the way down Africa to the very tip of Southern Africa. And there's a very high density of them in the Southern Africa region. And that's probably why I guess I got hooked to them, because there's just so many different kinds. It's a bit like collecting Pokemon. You've got to get them all, So yeah, most stapeliads are living really under the shade of grass and bushes. They tend to need a bit of sun protection. So if you see them in habitat, you actually find that they are generally hiding. So they're kind of hard to find. And you'll see some of the really robust species, such as Hoodia, maybe growing in the broad daylight, well, sunlight, I should say. But most species, Ceropegias, Huernias, Stapelias, they're mostly found under bushes, actually. So I'm going to share some pictures of where I've found them growing in habitat. So this is one that you can see it's growing. This is now in an arid region of South Africa, the Little Karoo, and it's growing in kind of low desert scrub, and you can see it's in quite a lot of shade there. And it is a fly-pollinated flower, so it's got these beautiful markings on the leaves and the hairy surfaces to try and convince a fly that this is actually a piece of decaying meat or something like that, that the fly is going to come in and feed. Those of you who don't know these plants, many of them have a rather offensive odor. Not all of them, but once you start collecting them, you actually don't mind those odors, and sometimes you actually quite like them. So yeah, I guess succulent collectors are kind of strange, I guess, compared to house plant growers. And then I guess when it comes to stapelia collectors are probably kind of strange when it comes to succulent collectors. So I guess you could say I'm at the end of the strange spectrum. Okay, so here's another picture of a habitat photo of a stapeliad. When I say a stapeliad, I'm talking about those plants which are somewhat closely related to stapelias. So they generally have a kind of a star-shaped flower. They have a fleshy stem. Ceropegias are a separate part of the Asclepiadaceae family. So that's when I say a stapeliad, I'm just trying to show you what I mean. So this is a pyranthus. So I don't know if you know what a pyranthus normally looks like. This gives you an idea of the harshness of the conditions it's growing in. This is growing in a town near Prince Albert in the Great Karoo, and you can see it's extremely dry. I think when I was there, I was on vacation during the summer, and in the summer, that part of the country gets very little rainfall. So these probably hadn't received no rain for a few months, and they really look like shriveled raisins. But if you get a burst of rain within a day or two, these things swell up and often start flowering within a week or two as well. So it's quite amazing the harshness of the conditions they're able to endure. Here's another example of a habitat photo. So these ones are found in the Little Karoo, which is a bit closer to the coast in Southern Africa. But it's still quite an arid area. It receives a bit more rain than the Great Karoo. But you can see there it's growing in the shade. And this is because it's on a south-facing slope. So in the Southern Hemisphere, south-facing means it's facing away from the sun usually. And here you can see this Duvalia is growing amongst rocks and amongst moss and lichen. So during the winter, when it gets its bulk of its rainfall, it's actually quite moist. And once again, this is also a carrion flower, so it has an offensive odor. So this would be pollinated by flies as well. And it has this creeping habit. So this would be found under a lot of low bushes, really getting protection from the sun if it is growing in a more sunny spot. And the next picture is of Orbia variegata. So this is, I think, known as the toad cactus or the toad plant. Starfish cactus is another name. Of course, I don't like them being called cacti at all because they're not cacti. But I will forgive people for doing it. At least they're collecting them. So these actually, I actually saw in Cape Town growing on the rocks near one of the very popular beaches, and they are really abundant. You can see hundreds and hundreds of specimens of these growing on these rocks. And what's quite interesting is that the variation in the flower patterns and color is quite diverse over a small area. Cape Town is really a nice holiday destination or vacation destination. So if any of you ever head to Cape Town, let me know, and I can certainly point out if you're interested in where to travel to see these plants in habitat. And then the next photo is a very special place for me, and I've got a video playing on the left-hand side. So in the Northern Cape of South Africa, there is you're bordering the Namib Desert, so it's extremely dry. And there's a place there called the Knersvlakte. The Knersvlakte is a place which is extremely flat, extremely barren and windswept, and it receives the majority of its moisture through fog that rolls in from the sea. So there's all kinds of succulent treasures like oophytums and vasculars, and it's really a succulent wonderland to go and visit. And even there, amongst these low sort of scrubby bushes, you can see some in the background of that video on the left. You see stapeliads growing. They're much rarer there. I think it's quite harsh, the conditions for them. But this is another Pyranthus species growing there. One thing I must say about the stapeliads as well, it's extremely difficult to identify them unless you see them flowering. So you can normally not identify them just based on the stems alone. Okay, so moving on to these plants. How do they actually? What's the life cycle of these plants? So, like many flowering plants, they have flowers. So you can see here, this is Stapelia gigantea, which is the largest stapeliad. And when it comes to flowers, these flowers are well over a foot across in diameter, and they are also fly pollinated. Some people said that they actually smell a bit like propane. So if you know the smell of propane, they add a sulfur compound to that. That's a bit like what these flowers smell like. And if you're lucky enough to get some pollination, they'll put up 2 large horn-like seed pods. And much like a milkweed, your milkweed seeds are windborne on parachutes, or the same with stapeliads. So here, I actually was able to catch them before they had opened fully. And you can see there's really probably 100 seeds there from those 2 different seed pods. So if you get seeds from your stapeliads, they're actually quite easy to grow. Here's an example of a Ceropegia. So Ceropegia is, like I mentioned, it's also a succulent plant, but it's more of a vine. And this is Ceropegia sandersonii, sandersonii, I should say. And here, this is a 3-in-1 photo. So not only can you see the unique parachute shaped flower that gives the plant its common name, which is the parachute plant, but you can see a pollinator at the top, a tiny fly at the top of the bloom. And on the in the background, you can actually see these seed pods, 2 sort of warty shaped seed pods. So that's what they would look like when they've been pollinated. And then the next photo I'm sharing is of another Ceropegia, also a more succulent one called Ceropegia stapeliiformis, because it's got stems which resemble those of stapelias. And you can see it's got a beautiful flower. And also what's quite unusual is the knobbly texture that you see on these seed pods as well. So I think also worth mentioning is we do get seed pods on stapeliads. Quite often they are hybrids, because they do hybridize quite easily between different species. So be quite wary if you buy seeds from a vendor, because unless they really know what they're doing and doing hand pollination, which is quite difficult, you actually may end up with a hybrid. So and also pollinating is quite difficult. They don't have kind of I guess dust-like pollen. They have pollen capsules called trying to remember the name of it. I think it's Polonia. No, that's not right. But anyway, there's a capsule of pollen, and those capsules actually get attached to the pollinator's foot or proboscis, and then they get transferred to the next flower. So that's quite difficult to do without a microscope. So the next picture is just a picture of some of the seeds. So you can see I've taken off that sort of wind-borne parachute that you see attached to them. And they're quite easy to grow from seed. This is just an example of some Ceropegia stapeliiformis seeds that I've grown. After a week, you should see good germination, and you can see the size they get to within 9 weeks. And then you also probably can tell that, I'm using quite a porous substrate there. I want to make sure that these things dry out relatively quickly. Otherwise, you can at risk root rot with these plants. Okay, so moving on to the whoops. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I just wanted to say something about the flower morphology. So a lot of stapeliads have got very intricate flowers. Here we've got two different examples. You've got Stapelia clavicorona, and that is because the name is because of the corona. So you can see the center of the flower. There's this crown-like structure, which is quite complex, and it's called the corona, and much like a crown, or the coronavirus. It's named after the shape of the virus as well. There's a crown-like shape on the surface of that virus. So the corona is something you see across all the stapeliads. And then the example on the right, Orbia rogersii, is one of the most intricate ones. It's got these beautiful pearl-like appendages and strange, it's hard to describe, but it's really beautiful. Unfortunately, a lot of the stapelia flowers are quite small, maybe an inch across, sometimes less. A few are much bigger, but you can only really appreciate them sometimes if you really get up close. And then a lot of the plants have cilia. So I don't know if you saw that video. I'm going to try play it again. But the petals, and that helps to make them stand out. So this particular plant is a beautiful Orbia called Orbia ciliata, named after that unique ciliated edge of the flower. Unfortunately, this is quite a rare plant. I haven't seen it available in the USA, but it was one I grew in South Africa. Shapes and designs, and here you've got Ceropegia nilotica and Ceropegia verruculosa. They've got a lot of hairs, you can see that, and that's because Ceropegias actually imprison their pollinators. So you may have seen that little fly in the earlier photograph. That's because the fly gets trapped at the base of the flower by little hairs within the throat of the flower, and it helps to increase the chance of pollination. So the fly will stay in there longer. Eventually, the flower will be let out when those hairs wither. But it's quite a unique mechanism. And I've actually got a video of that somewhere. I couldn't find it to share with you, but have a look inside your Ceropegias if you have them when they're flowering. Sometimes you'll see little flies trapped inside. By the way, that Ceropegia verruculosa is also a very rare species, probably almost an endangered species, so quite fortunate to have a plant of that in my collection. So moving on to the different types of stapeliads. The Orbias are some of the most well-known. Orbia variegata. This is very common and easy to grow one, so I would recommend that to anyone who doesn't really have much experience in these. Commonly available plant, and still really stunning flowers. It does tolerate more cold conditions than many of them. A lot of stapeliads are warm weather plants. This one can withstand some cooler conditions without too much fuss, although none of them can withstand sub-freezing temperatures. So they do need to be protected from really cold weather. And many of them, which are more tropical, would like to be above 60 degrees, I guess, in the winter as well. Another Orbea, which is quite an easy plant to grow. Sorry, did someone want to say something?
Not that I heard of.
Okay, sorry, I thought I heard a noise. Is Orbea speciosa. So that means beautiful in Latin. And as you can see, it is a beautiful species. It does like somewhat warmer conditions, but I find this species thrives in the conditions here in Louisiana. So I think in Houston as well, you'll find this will be quite an easy species to grow. Then another one I'm growing quite successfully here in Louisiana is Orbea melanis. This one is quite a smelly one, but really eye-catching when it flowers, but also does tend to attract the flies too. So I think if you don't like, if you've got a sensitive nose, you might want to give this particular species a skip. And here's a couple more examples. So it's quite difficult to choose which photo to share with you because I've got a lot of different flowers, and it's a bit like choosing between your children. Which is your favorite? So just to give you an example of some of the different flower colors and shapes, a lot of the Orbeas have a central ring, which is that sort of donut-shaped structure in the middle, which gives the name to Orbea, orb-shaped. And that annulus is also found in some of the other genuses like Huonia as well. And I think I'll show you some pictures of that. So moving on to the next genus of interest that I'd like to talk about is the Stapelia family. So of course, I've already species. The next one I want to show you is Stapelia grandiflora. So this is also a beautiful species, not commonly seen here in the USA. There is a lot of hybrids being sold as Stapelia grandiflora, unfortunately. The true species, when it has a bud, the bud is actually circular, not sort of pointed. And it has this dark tip to the flower and this very white, hairy covering on the flowers. I've actually got a small plant of this, which I'm trying to grow. So hopefully at some point I will have cuttings of this available. But for now, it's difficult to find the true species of this here in the USA. Two other ones of note are black bells, which is Stapelia leondertzia on the left, and Stapelia Getalefi. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I'm going to try. And that's a much rarer species, hard to come by. The black bells, Stapelia leondertzia, is quite easy to grow here in our southern climate. Has these large bell-shaped flowers that tend to droop depending on how big a pot you have. In habitat, they wouldn't droop, they'd be lying on the surface of the soil. So if you have a big enough pot, they will actually lie on the surface of the soil, and you'll be able to see inside the bell-shaped flower. And those are quite large species. Another slightly smaller species is Stapelia hirsuta. And Stapelia hirsuta is also an easy species to grow here. It's got attractive flowers, unique markings. You can see there's some similarities between the Stapelia species, but unique enough for them to be distinct species. And these are two different variations I have of the same species. So I guess you could say you do see some different coloration between clones of the same species. Okay, so then moving on to another genus, which is the Huonia species. And here we have
What is going on? Connection, please. From the internet today. Oh no, we froze. Let me see. Hello. Uh-oh. We are in trouble. Okay. Let me see. Uh-huh. Oh, okay. I think let's wait for him to come back.
You can try to ask him to stop sharing his video.
Uh-huh.
Does that constitute?
Oh,
the
that's
connection, so just share the
so just
presentation.
share the picture. Okay. Okay. Sorry, guys. Let me contact Philip on Messenger and see if he's there. Hmm. Yes, please. Uh-huh.
I'd like to mention, I'd like to say that as well, we have a few members that had a lot of damage, a lot of damage our membership there. They did roof, foundation. So I hope everybody's playing it well. And if there's ever a storm that comes like this, like plant health, I'm sure that we mobilize people that just kind of keep that in mind for.
Hello, Echo, can you hear me?
Yes, you're back in. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, great.
So
So
sorry about that.
we have a friend here that gave us a great suggestion. Is that maybe if
Yes.
you don't share the video, the internet will be more stable.
Okay, I'm going to try that. Let's see.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And we are ready for you to share your screen again.
Okay.
There we go.
And hopefully it works. And let's see. Which slide was I on? Do you know?
Yeah, right there, the Huenia.
Okay. Did I finish speaking about this one?
Can you please repeat this slide? Because I think we lost you on this slide.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, this particular species is Huenia palancei, and you can see it's got unique stems, which is one of the few stapeliads which is identifiable by its stem alone. And you can see there the variation within a species. You see quite different stem structures and flowers, but both are very beautiful clones of the same species. Here we have two different Huenias, just to show you the difference in coloration, and really beautiful plants. The one on the left, guttata, and the one on the right is oculata. Both quite unusual flowers, attractive, but also quite small. I think oculata is only about maybe less than an inch across, and I think guttata is about an inch across. And on the other hand, you do also see some with larger flowers. So this is a rare variation of owl eyes, or Huenia zebrina. I think it's also called the lifesaver cactus, I think, if I remember correctly. So this is actually a variety with much larger flowers than are typical. This is Huenia zebrina variety magniflora. So these flowers are about 2 inches across, really shiny flowers. And at the end of the presentation, I think I'll turn off my presentation, and I've got an example of one flowering next to me here on my desk, so I can hopefully show you this plant.
Oh, that'd be nice.
And then, yeah, Huenia primulina, quite a sweet flower. This one can also flower in quite large clusters, so easy to grow as well if you have the right conditions. And then, yeah, this is actually one of my favorites, Huenia kennediana. So it's also got quite unique stems. You can see they're kind of round, almost like marbles. And it's got this really toothy looking flower, very cool. It grows in mats and a very restricted area. So not common in nature, but in cultivation, you see it being offered, relatively often these days. So And I think I actually got a cutting of this originally from somebody in the Houston area, if I remember correctly. It may have been San Antonio, I can't remember now. But yeah, easy to grow and really unique looking. And then, yeah, I just realized I haven't labeled this slide, but this is now another genus, the Pyranthus. So I think you saw some examples earlier on in habitat where they were not flowering. Here you can see the types of flowers that they have. These are really small, but they flower en masse, usually in fall. Really pretty flowers and quite easy to grow as well. I'll have to go, yeah, maybe when I get back to this, I'll have to look at what those particular species were. Another genus which I'm also very fond of is Duvalia. I think you saw one earlier in habitat. Here you've got two examples, Duvalia parviflora and Duvalia sulcata. And parviflora's got tiny flowers. That's the name of the meaning of the Latin name there. Sulcata is actually one of the larger flowering Duvalias. That's over an inch across. Kind of unusual looking, both attractive. And neither of these really have any odor. So, in fact, most of the Huernias as well, I don't find have much odor. It tends to be the Orbias and the Stapeliads that have a stronger odor. So, bear that in mind if you are offended by odors. This one here is a mouthful. So, it's I think it's almost a monotypic species, if I remember correctly. There's a few subspecies within it, but it's really a very sweet looking plant. It's that is probably a 2-inch pot. No, that's probably probably a 2-inch pot. So those flowers are tiny, but you can see really unusual. Lots of flowers across the stems, easy to grow as well. And yeah, so I've actually got one of these growing as well in my current collection. So I'm looking forward to that providing more and more flowers over time. Easy to grow, surprisingly. So I don't know why you don't see some of these things more widely available. Here's another quite unique species, Tavarizia. I think I spelled it wrong there maybe, but Tavarizia Barclay. I think it's also known as the devil's trumpet, I think, if I remember correctly. It's got quite unique stem shapes and these beautiful trumpet-shaped flowers. Also doesn't have any odor as well. And this one, maybe I should tell you a little bit about the soil requirements of stapeliads in general. So you can see that I'm using a very gritty soil here. And that's generally the case across most of the stapeliads. I have, over time, transitioned to using a more gritty mix. In South Africa, because it's an arid country, you can get away with a very different mix. Here, you have to use a gritty mix if you want stapeliads to really grow well. Bizarrely, I've been quite successful in using Miracle Grow cactus mix, the cheap stuff you buy at Lowe's during summer. But as soon as summer's over, the plants hate it and they tend to rot because you've got way too much organic material in the soil. So if you want to, if you really want to get fast growth over summer, plant it out, but then in fall, repot it in something much grittier, because it's probably going to struggle to survive the winter when you've got this lovely warm environment for fungus around its roots. So I would strongly recommend using a gritty mix. And the gritty mix that I'm using currently is a mixture of Turfus, I can't remember the specific number, Turfus. You buy a Southwest fertilizer in Houston. That's where I got mine from. And I'm using pumice, and I'm using chicken grit, which is crushed granite, and a bit of cocoa coir, compressed cocoa coir. Those are my 4 ingredients in roughly even proportions. I'm thinking even of phasing out the cocoa coir, actually, but I'll see how that goes. And I do also use Osmocote, and I use hydroponic fertilizer when I feel like that Osmocote's kind of used up its life. So those are my secrets to my growing mix.
Oh, thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay, no problem. And then, yeah, maybe just the next one's another beautiful plant. This is now a uniquely hairy stapeliad, much like the Huernia I showed you earlier, the Palancii. Those are the only 2 stapeliads that have these uniquely hairy stems. And you can see this one has grown out a warm hand of friendship towards me here. So quite an unusual looking plant, beautiful flowers. And it's meant to be tough to grow, but it seems to love the conditions here in the south. So it grows in Madagascar. A lot of the stapelianthuses come from Madagascar, and they like our summers. So just don't let them go in the baking sun. Make them, you know, shaded, but they do seem to like our weather here. So maybe let me talk a little bit about watering of stapeliads. So in general, most stapeliads grow in regions that do not get winter rainfall at all. So in winter, you should not water them unless they're about to, you know, shrivel up and die completely. Just give them a bit of water then. But I would say from, you know, end of November until probably March or even April, try not water them, because they really prefer weather conditions above 70. And only then do you really start seeing growth starting again. So there's a couple of exceptions. Those that grow in the southern Cape of South Africa, those are winter rainfall plants. So some of those will actually grow in cooler conditions, but the vast majority, in my experience, are summer grows. And yeah, so how do I know when to water them? I normally do it when I actually feel my plants. I feel the leaves of the Serapedias to see if they feel kind of flaccid. I feel the stems of my stapeliads to see if they no longer feel plump. If that's the case, I then feel like, okay, then they're ready to be watered. Yeah, what else can I tell you about cultivation? Let me move on to the next picture. I think there's only a couple more slides to go.
Why is it blank?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is obviously the Persian carpet flower in the south. So this is growing in miracle. See that soil? You can see the perlite. And so, you know, you can grow this. Yeah, in winter, don't give it any water until spring, but you can grow this. Actually, you know, bring it inside over winter. Probably leave it on your windowsill. Take it out in spring, and you're going to be rewarded with these beautiful flowers. They don't smell too offensive. To me, they smell like cow dung. So some people like the smell of cow dung, apparently. They don't really smell like decaying meat. Unfortunately, the biggest drawback I find with this species is that the flowers only last a day. So most of the other stapeliads last for, you know, a week or so. This one has the shortest span flowers. So it's quite disappointing. I think maybe if you water it on the day it flowers, it may last a day or so longer, but I've struggled to get this one to grow to last longer than a short period. Maybe I should just talk a little bit about propagation of these plants. So I've shown you earlier about you know, growing from seed. They are also quite easy to grow from cuttings. So you do need to dust them with sulfur. You want to stop any chance of getting fungal growth because they are susceptible to fungi. And you know, if you dust them with sulfur and you leave them for a week, maybe in a cool, in a warmish and dry space, not in a hot place, then you can kind of lay them on the soil. You don't want to put them too deep in the soil because then they may end up being too wet. So a lot of them I actually just lay on the surface of the soil. I'll put a small stone on top of maybe one end of it to help it give it good contact with the soil surface. And then I'll water the soil maybe weekly, you know, just so that it provides an environment for them to actually sense the moisture and send out roots. And that's been quite successful for me. And I guess the last thing to talk about would probably be, let me go to the next slide first. Okay, so Succulent ampliata, that's another show-stopping plant. I know it's got some rather uniquely shaped flowers. Some people kind of snigger at the shape of the flowers because it doesn't always evoke the best of images. But I must say that, you know, I do have a shop on Etsy, and this is my best seller because a lot of people seem to like this plant. But nevertheless, it's an easy growing plant, and it has these spectacular flowers. Some people buy them as joke plants for their relatives. But I actually just think it's an attractive plant. When it's in the wind, they sway like little candles as well. So easy to grow as well. And in fall, you get this big display like this, but they tend to send out flowers throughout spring and summer as well. So highly recommend this particular species. So yeah, I think the last thing to mention around cultivation would be the diseases that you get and pests with these plants. So they are unfortunately quite susceptible to some pests. I would guess the most troublesome pests are mealybugs, including root mealybug. I haven't really seen root mealybug here in the US, but in South Africa that was a big problem. And red spider mites. So if you have either of these two, I would definitely recommend a systemic insecticide. I would use something with imidacloprid, which is not good for bees, but you're not spraying this on a plant that's pollinated by bees. So I would definitely recommend that for killing off mealybugs. So that's a neonicotid insecticide. And then for red spider mite, I would cycle between two or three different systemic. They're very hard to get rid of once they're there. So you need to, really treat them several times with different things because they build up resistance. So those are the two main pest types. And then in terms of the main, I guess, diseases would be fungal. So fungal really is the issue. So I find that you need to probably spray. Occasionally in summer, I do spray for red spider mite as a preventative. And then the spray I use also has an antifungal, and I think that helps. But if you do find you're getting any kind of fungal growth, I would recommend you isolate that plant. You cut away any fungal affected stems and you throw those in the trash, and you try and restart the plant with fresh cuttings. If you leave it and hope it goes away, you end up losing the whole plant. One way of saving a tiny cutting that I think is also worth trying is to graft it on another stapelia, like an easy growing stapelia like a gigantea, if you've got a rare plant. That's something I would recommend as well. I haven't done it too much, but I think it's something I'm going to do more of, because even I, with my experience in these plants, I still have losses occasionally. So I try and keep a few plants of them available, two or three plants at least, so I have insurance, because that way if I lose one, then at least I can restart another one from cuttings. So I think that is the end of my presentation. And there's just a picture of one of my sons. I've got two boys. He fortunately is interested in nature like me, and he actually grew that plant on the left that he's smelling, and this is now 5 years ago, so he's now 14-year-old. So this is an old picture, but he grew that from seed himself in the pot.
Wow.
And then in South Africa, plants grow like weeds, so there wasn't too much skill involved. That was an Orbia variegata. You can see he's holding up another, I think it's a Stapelia paniculata there. And so he's still interested in plants. He's actually growing a few different small, easy growing ones now, and he's listed them in my Etsy shop at the moment. So if you see any low price plants in my shop, they're normally being sold by him. And then that's last picture is with me a few years back with my Stapelia grandiflora there. I was looking for a picture I have from when I was 12 years old, but I do have a picture of me from back then, but I decided it wasn't good enough quality to share on this presentation. So I guess we're probably out of time just about, but if we have got time, I'm really more than willing to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And meanwhile, do we have any questions for Philip? Yes, what's your name of your Etsy shop? Can you share it?
It's called Thirst for Succulents. And that's thirst for succulents, and it's thirst with the 4 is a number 4 because I couldn't fit the whole name in, so I had to come up with that's my Etsy shop. And then also I do have a Facebook page where I share tips on my plants and photos, and that's more of just, I guess, a goodwill service. So I love to share my photos and things there. Some of my photos have gone quite viral. I've had some which have gone, over 40,000 likes, for example. So, and some of the ones I think you've seen in this presentation, actually. So, certainly recommend my Facebook page, and that is Thirst for Succulents, where the 4 is the spelled out word FOR, not the number.
Okay, I will make sure to share your Etsy shop and also your Facebook page at the meeting with our members. I have them both.
Thank you, Echo.
You're welcome.
And let me stop sharing. I will also then just
Okay.
I'll show you this. I'm going to put my camera and show you this plant. Hopefully I can. Hopefully you can see it. I don't know if the whole. So this is now. Oh, it's hard to show you.
Let me see if I can make you a spotlight for everybody. There you go.
Try to show it. Here you go. So that is the. Oh, it doesn't want to focus, does it?
Maybe if you turn off
The filter. I think you have a filter.
My screen. I think I've got a blurred background. So let me see if I can. If I
you
can
blurred
change
background.
that. See, I'm not very familiar with Zoom, so I don't know what to do. Oh well. Well, hopefully I can come over to the fall show and bring some plants over there as well. So there we go. I think I've turned off the background, so maybe now you can see it better.
Yes, now we can see it.
So that's the Magniflora. So this is now the Zebrina that most of you know has a flower that's about half this size. So that's the one that I was showing you in the presentation.
Yeah, that's the one with the bigger than a normal flower from a Zebrina.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Oh, that's really nice. So do you know which person to talk to if you want to come to our fall show and sale?
I don't, but I guess I will probably contact you, Eka, and you can tell me.
And I will make sure that he contacts you. He's Eddie.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
Thank you very much. Oh, I think I see a hand that's raising in our audience. I think she has a question.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't hear anything. No.
Oh, okay. Let me repeat her question. So she's wondering if you have any success hand pollinating any of your plants, and if you do you have any tips?
So I think I kind of alluded to this during the presentation that you really need a microscope to be able to do that. So I've never tried. These pollen clusters are tiny. So there are a few people that are experts in doing that, but to me, that's the future. And maybe when I'm retired and I have time, I may do that, but I believe you need a lot of patience. So unfortunately, I haven't. So most of my propagations are really just through stem cuttings, but it's definitely something that I'm interested in doing, but not yet.
Okay, I have a question. So are these plants self-pollinating? Like if you want to need to make seeds, do you have to have two different plants, or it's successful by just one plant?
I'm not sure. Some definitely are, because I mean, if you have a string of hearts, for example, it tends to pollinate quite easily by itself. So I guess, it's not being pollinated by itself. I'm guessing small flies are flying between the flowers, but I think it is self-fertile, I guess, that's what I mean. So I think you do need a pollinator there, but I think a lot of the species are self-fertile. But as I mentioned, they do also hybridize quite easily. So there's definitely a good chance that you may end up with hybrids if you have two flowering at the same time of different species.
Okay. And what is your winter management for these plants? Like, what's the minimal temperature you expose them to?
So depends on the species, as I say, but I'm treating most these days as more tropical type species. So I will bring them. I've got a indoor grow house thing with with LED lights. So this last winter, because my collection is expanding quite a lot, I've been bringing them in and I have them in there, and that actually isn't perfect because it helps to it seems to help propagate spider mites. So I had a big spider mite problem in winter. So I'm still learning. I've only been in the US for 5 years now. So in South Africa, I would have just left them because I had where I lived in South Africa, I had a kind of a plastic greenhouse which kept the temperature just above freezing, and I kept the plants completely dry. and then I literally just left them for 3 or 4 months. Here, I find the winter's a bit longer, so you probably need to try and just keep them ticking over for a few months. If they become very shriveled, then you can give them a little bit of water. But I think you saw in my photos from the habitat that these plants can survive, for a long period without water. I often go away on vacation overseas, and if I do, then I just these are succulents. You can leave them. I mean, in the habitat, they'll go up to a year without, actually getting water in the drought. So, do yourself a favor and take a cutting of one of your cacti or your succulents and leave it on your bathroom windowsill out of the sun. I can almost guarantee you in a year's time, you could probably put that cutting in soil and it would root in many cases.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you very much. That's very, very helpful. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay. Philip, you're more than welcome to stay to watch our meeting. And we have more agenda to go over in the meeting.
I think I'm gonna sign off, Echo, because it's kind of hard to hear. Apart from you, it's hard to hear what's going on. So I think I'm going to sign off. But thank you very much for the invitation. I hope that everyone enjoyed my presentation, and certainly anyone's free to reach out to me on my Facebook page if they have any questions. And certainly, if you're interested in buying these types of plants, have a look at my shop if you're interested. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, Echo. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Thank you so much, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye, everyone.